In this episode of The Toolbox, I'll go over some of the best ways that you can design websites with little to no styles. I'm also going to do a demo of one of my favorite of all the minimalist classes, Pico.css, and I'll let you decide if it's the right thing for your next site. So last week in the shorts, I covered a small framework, and it was called simple.css. And I discovered that I really enjoyed what it was doing, and I began to wonder if there were other things that did something similar. So this is the framework that I talked about. It's essentially a framework where you just install some CSS and it gives you this pretty decent looking website, I think. I wasn't crazy about the navigation, so that's one thing I didn't like. But I thought, wow, this is a good idea. Like, what if you could design websites without having to use any class names, no CSS, or as little as possible? And sure enough, I went down this rabbit hole. And hold on, this is actually not quite the right width. So here we go. Yeah, so I know I'm onto something when I post something about a library, and Morton, my friend, drops me a bomb. So I made a comment about a simple, and he's like, "This is just a reset." So that's when I know I've got the good stuff. And so we had like a little sort of discussion about, whether or not this might be a good thing, or, interesting to see what people thought about it. I mean, some people thought that, to me, the defaults have been around since like the mid 90s. I think the internet, or the web at least, just came out like in about 95. And it feels like when you look at a website without any CSS, that the defaults for all the websites haven't really evolved over time. And so that was my contention, that why haven't we sort of changed the defaults to make them look reasonable? And I think that a lot of these frameworks are doing a pretty good job with that. And that it would be great to have some defaults that just looked great enough so that if you just wanted to go and write some basic HTML, you really didn't even have to do anything. It would be like responsive. It would have decent system fonts, a decent button, decent tables. Like, think about all the stuff that you have to add to make a website look decent. You have to redesign anything to do with forms because they look horrible. You have to sort of go back to like system fonts. I know that that's what the CSS resets are for, but why haven't we evolved since then? And so I think that possibly something to ponder. I think that it would be good if we had better defaults. And that's what some of these sort of frameworks or libraries are trying to address. So before I do that, let's go over some other interesting things I found on the website. I have 3 things. And the number one is called, I do want to mention that all these things are in an article on rabo.org. So if you are wondering what the links are, I made an article, and if you come over here, so you can actually play this, and this is playing live. So if you come all the way down to the bottom of this article, you'll see a list of all the links of what I'll be talking about today. So I don't put them up in the chat just because they get very complicated. So so you can just go to rabo.org. It's the first article. And all the way at the bottom are the links, and I sort of make a few of the comments that I'll be talking about today. So this is actually, I use this as my script as well. So the first one that I wanted to show is this Chrome sort of extension called SVG Export. So for me, I need to get a logo all the time from a website or something that I've used before on a website. And it'd be really nice to be able to sort of, I usually have to go to a website, find some sort of logo. Sometimes I have to go like in the inspector, and then I try to like cut out the PNG or the SVG. Sometimes it's even worse because the SVGs are sometimes embedded and they're really hard to copy and paste. Well, this extension actually solves that for you, and it allows you to very quickly go to any website and get all of the sort of PNGs, SVGs, anything that's in there. Especially, I think it's useful for SVGs. So let's go to something like tailwindcss.com, and I've got it installed right here. And if I click on this, it's just going to take me to this sort of view right here, and I can scroll down and see if any of these pieces are what I need. So it just takes a look at all the SVGs. So if I wanted the logo for Tailwind CSS, here it is. And notice here on the left, it lets you do SVGs. You can automatically convert them to JPEGs or PNGs. So another thing that I do is sometimes for some of my overlays, I need like a little icon, right? So I would like maybe this icon of the Tailwind CSS, and I don't see just the wave by itself. I'm sure if I went through the site, it would get me to a place with the wave. So yeah, I bet you if I hit that button right now, it would somewhere, maybe not. There might be a place where I can get the sort of wave by itself. I'm sure if I navigate to the site, it will let me do that. So, but it's pretty handy to just have it all in there. And you can click right here and resize. That's another thing that you end up doing, right? When you download like an image or an SVG, a lot of times they're like an unnatural size, right? It doesn't work for what you're doing. For the icons, I want like just an icon or a logo type, and you'll see like in the demo that I'm doing, like the overlay for the websites, I like to have like a little icon, and so I would come in here and grab this. You can go directly to some popular online programs. From here, you can click right here to just get the code, and it copies the SVG to the clipboard, or you can hit this download button and it'll download the SVG for that logo, which is super cool. But you can actually also say, well, I actually want a PNG output. I don't want the original SVG, and say that you needed a GitHub logo as well. I'm going to pick a few things here. So that's like a gray GitHub logo. There's like a Discord. And then you can also hit download selected from here, and it'll compress it into a zip file. So you could just hit save and it'll compress that into a zip file. And then you could just grab them and drag and drop them into your application, or go directly. I just downloaded this week and I've been using it all the time. So hopefully that is sort of useful. Let's see, we're also, okay, so let's see if there's any problems on the website. And we have the awesome Dwana Hartley. She is manning the chat. So if you have any questions, she is ready and thankfully able to answer anything you might have while I'm talking over here. But I will check periodically. So this is pretty cool. Let's see, Dubai. There's people coming in from all over the place. Dubai, North Carolina. Wow. Oh, wow, Jaipur. I don't know where that is, but New York, Ecuador. I used to live in Ecuador, Chendo, so that's cool. And I'm currently in Florida, so that's cool, Patrick. And there's a bunch of other people, so just to check, chat is working. Thank you so much for letting me know. Yeah, you can watch this broadcast on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is nice because it does give you like a reminder. If you see that I have a broadcast happening, then you'll get like an Outlook reminder or whatever other calendar you have. YouTube is nice because it stores everything afterwards. It's really difficult sometimes to find like the previous broadcasts that I've done. So YouTube is nice because you can always go back. And then I have a lot more sort of smaller content. A lot of times in YouTube, what I'll do is I'll take the main event, the thing that I'm discussing today, and I'll clip it out and put it as another video, and then I'll do other videos as well. So that's pretty cool. Let's see. So there's a lot more people. Wow, Peru. I was right next to Peru. So super cool. And always the mysterious LinkedIn user. Hello. So that happens when somebody has like a certain amount of privacy settings. They just show up as LinkedIn user, which is cool. Keeping it sort of on the down low, I guess. Down low. All right. So next up, I have another little framework. This one's actually... it actually costs money, and it's called Type It. And I don't know why it's not pulling up right now, but let me just paste it over here on the tab. So it's a Type It.js. I've seen a lot of websites that have this sort of style to them. Like you go to the website and it starts typing something in. So this is essentially a framework to allow you to create those animations. I think it costs like $20. And you can go to pricing and check that out. I like the style. The way that they're doing this is by letting you very easily target some sort of class or ID, and then you can just start defining what you want to do. Type this, and then delay for a certain period of time, and then move 8 characters to the back, and then type an S. So it's very easy to pick up what you want it to do here. So very well put together, and from graphic design, you learn that motion is one of those things that really captures people's attention. So I think that this would be good to have like for really any website that has sort of some text at the top, and you can very easily add a cool animation. So I like that one a lot. Then in addition to that, so I found this one like at the very end of what I was doing, and I thought it was very charming, a little bit odd, but this is called Logo Maker, and it's from NameCheap, which is like a DNS place, I guess. But I figured that if I was needing a logo for some sort of demo, that this might be something cool. So let me just try to type in a name here. I'll hit create free logo. And then it asks you a series of questions about what kind of type do you want. I think I'm going to go with a sans serif clean. And then I like this one, sophisticated. I'm not sure about serious, cultured, and elegant. But it just lets you go through a bunch of selections here. And you just sort of find the ones that you'll like. Let's see, I'll go with this one. And so it's actually allowing you to pick more than one color. And I'm sorry, more than one font. And then it lets you pick a color palette. Let's see, home of the toolbox here. And I'm going to hit continue. And then, okay, the icon part is pretty cheesy. It has pretty cheesy icons, but this is for like a quick and dirty logo for maybe a demo that you're doing. So I'll pick those three, and then I'll hit continue with 3 icons. And then it just gives you a bunch of choices from the selections that you made. And man, these look awful compared to the ones that I saw earlier. So maybe if you like one of these, what I like is once you choose one, then it lets you see which fonts you chose and where you can get them. If you wanted to get them, it gives you some sort of samples of perhaps some merch and microsites and stuff like that. And you can, if you don't like anything about this, you can go in here and sort of change it and customize it just by clicking on some of these different sort of styles that it gives you. Man, and I'm not really hitting that much amazing stuff here. And once you do this, then you can download the logo and just start using it. Now, it does want you to, if you want to download the logo, it does want you to register. But since I have that new tool, I can just click on my SVG Export, and it's actually going to show them all to me right here. And I can just download them from here directly and get them. You know, if you're doing like a quick demo and you need some sort of like SVG or a little logo, this might be a cool little tool. I know that I use that kind of stuff all the time, so it's a little charming. It's sort of cheesy. I like the customization and the ability to sort of create an app version of what you're doing here. An app sort of that takes you through that process and then gives you all the options here at the end. So let's see. So as I mentioned before, after looking for a lot of sites like Simple CSS, I found a bunch of really cool stuff that I enjoyed. So I'm going to share with you some of the ones that I found and kind of give you a little bit of a review of them. And then I'll go into, a full demo of the one that I think is probably the best one, which is called Pico.css. So the first one that I have is not actually for websites, but it's sort of a amalgamation of CSS for Markdown files. So Markdown is a writing format that you can use on the web that normally converts to HTML. It's really convenient because you can write very quickly in Markdown, and this is basically a set of styles for Markdown. In Markdown, you can do very few things. So you can do a headline of different levels. You can do like a horizontal rule. You can do lists of all kinds. You can do tables. They're a little bit difficult to do. And of course, you can do links to things, but you don't have like all the options that you would on a page. So this one is just a sort of a place that has a bunch of styles. I really love this one called Splendor. So you can click in here and then go to the demo, and you can see that it looks really nice. And it shows you very quickly sort of a demo of what the different pieces look like. So this is probably my favorite. And if I was looking to maybe write something and, just do a, quick code pen or something like that to show somebody some stuff, and I didn't want to make a whole page, or I didn't want to download Bootstrap, and I didn't want to customize my style. This is just a quick way of getting to some of this content. This is by far the simplest. So if you go here, let's see, all the style sheets are found here. So if we take a look at Modest, Yeah, that I'm not really crazy about the thin fonts here. I think also it might be like a good sort of starting file for some CSS project that you're doing. Let me just click on all these and I'll just go through them. I thought some of them were cool. Oh, here we go. Here's the place where you can actually get to all of them. So Splendor, Retro. This is pretty cool, kind of the typewriter look. And this is what a block quote would look like. Here's some sample code. So very, very basic, not anything. Although this one looks pretty good. I like this one too. This air one I think looks really nice. So at the base level, this will give you a set of styles that I think are good starters, or at least conversation starters, and that you can use whenever you just want to write something and then send it to somebody to take a look at. And you don't want it to have that Times New Roman with all those other problems that we talked about. All right, so probably Splendor is my favorite. And maybe as the defaults, or on any browser, you can also override your defaults. If you wanted to sort of write something in Markdown, a couple of weeks ago I talked about this tool called MD Block, and basically it lets you put in you add a script tag like this, and it lets you create an MD Block tag. So it adds an MD Block tag to your HTML, and then you can just write Markdown in there, and it will convert it to HTML, even though you've written everything in Markdown. So this is a pretty good combo for that particular style sheet. All right, the next one that I saw that I liked was this one called Water CSS. So that one is sort of a step up from what we looked at. So let me make this a little smaller, because I think I usually zoom way in. So sometimes you can't appreciate how nice something looks. So you can see that it's sort of a dark background style, and it looks pretty good. This is probably the first one that I think caught my attention. If you do a search for these, there are a ton of these. Now this one's super, super simple, but it does have like a light and a dark theme, right? And it gives you the links to a CDN where you could just install these in CodePen or just add them to your project. It doesn't have a lot of choices for what grid size you can use. So it's not like Bootstrap where you have like, options for what happens at different breakpoints. It is responsive, but very limited. Like essentially it grows and shrinks and it stops at a certain width, and that's pretty much it. So not a lot that you can do here. There's no navigation in this one, and there's no components. So it's clearly super basic. It does have one cool feature, and that is a bookmarklet. So somewhere around here, you can create a bookmarklet, and it essentially is like a bookmark. And when you go to a site and you want to read it, a lot of times you go to a site and it's got like 50,000 ads, and it's really hard to read. So this one does have a bookmarklet, right? And you essentially, when you save this as a bookmark, it basically will let you hit that bookmark, and it'll convert a site into into something that looks like this, which is pretty cool if you're just trying to read something and you don't really care about all the styling on websites. So let's see. The next one that I liked was something called AtriCSS. I'm not even sure if I am pronouncing that one well. You can see that it does come with some navigation. So the navigation looks pretty decent up here. So it does let you do like a header, and I think at the bottom you can see the footer. It does have a few more options. So notice that you can have different kinds of buttons by adding properties properties into your button class. You can say, okay, this is the normal button, it would look like this. The secondary button would look like this, and then the disabled button looks like that. Now, I know disabled is a thing, but I'm not sure secondary is, and I'm not even sure if you're supposed to do disabled on buttons. I think it's primarily for input fields, but it's getting there. I think this one has a little bit more possibilities. The forms look pretty nice, much better than the default forms. Again, they're like 100% of the width. The images have this like rounded edges, which look nice. The tables look pretty good. So this is a step up from what we've seen so far. And you can add Prism.js if you wanted syntax highlighting for the code and stuff. So kind of a step up. I'm going in order of awesomeness. So although this doesn't look that. Also, there's a few different themes. So if you want to see what the page would look like without any styles, you can click on this. So this is the ridiculous way that HTML looks without any sort of formatting at all. And then there's bright lime green, which looks sort of cool. There is midnight green, which is the default, and it's the one that we saw. And I'm not sure about these other ones. This dark forest green is like a little bit too bright, but maybe if you were looking for something with a lot of contrast, that would work. Or there's a couple of pinks. This one actually looks pretty good. I don't know that everybody would like to read with that level of brightness, but there's also like a light fairy pink. So this actually is a little bit more readable, but I'm not necessarily crazy about that color. I think there's better options here. So a step up from what we saw earlier. And next up is, I don't know how to pronounce this one, but it's called Bahunya. So I think it's Bahunya. This one is a little bit better. You can see the navigation up here. It does come with navigation, and the navigation sticks to the top. The sad thing is that the navigation is a hamburger menu, so it only has like the hamburger menu. So if you're not into the hamburger menu, then you are bummed because that's what it has. And you could see that with the installation, it shows you how you do the navigation. And I wanted to point out that this is what I mean by a sort of classless or very few class style for these kind of projects. Notice that to create the navigation, you do a nav tag, then you do a h1 with a link if you want, some sort of branding like this right here. And then you just do a bunch of links, right? So you don't have to, if you compare that to like what you do in Bootstrap to do a navigation or a nav bar, it's unbelievable how many classes and subclasses, and sometimes you have to add data attributes, and then you have to add like the hamburger menu drop down, and then you wrap something else. Yeah, you create like a bunch of containers and subcontainers, and it can get pretty intense to just do something simple. So I like that these frameworks are pretty simple. And this is also where you start getting into customization. So if you don't like, say, this gold background, you can actually just modify it by setting a root variable to the colors that it uses to whatever you want. And you'll see like some of the more advanced frameworks are actually doing this type of thing. They'll just give you a way to customize, usually with with root variables or custom properties, how they call it. And then you can customize any other part of the very simple style sheet that it gives you. So definitely a step up from what we have, but you do have to live with that hamburger menu. And I know that that's not necessarily what people like. So I do like the use of fonts. One thing I don't like is how it uses fonts. Let's see, fonts. So if we go to customization, you'll see that by default it uses, it uses Century Schoolbook, which I don't know that that's a font that's installed on any machine. Today the standard is to use system fonts so that every system has a set of pre-installed fonts. And so it's better to do that. But it does give you some HTML where you could customize that if you wanted to. So I'm not crazy about this particular choice. I'm not too crazy about the hamburger menu. But again, this is like super easy to set up and super easy to work with. And if you don't like this one, also, you can go find a lot more of these all over the place. All right, the next one is called MVP CSS. And this one, it looks pretty good. And you can see here that we're getting some different layout type items. So we have navigation, and we have, buttons and some sort of like header type section, right? So here's how you install it. It has cards. And if you want to see how to do some of these, you could just really inspect on these. And you'll see that they're very easy to do usually. So the cards let's see, these cards are done by placing things in an aside tag, right? So every one of these cards is just an aside, and it knows to make them look like cards. And so you'll see that in some of these different frameworks. And then you just add an image, and it puts the image at the top nicely. Then you add the headline, and then just some paragraphs. And this is what I'm talking about. A lot of times, like if you went to like Bootstrap and you tried to add like a card, you have to have like several levels of containers, a container for the header. If you do links or buttons, it's just a mess of things that you have to remember. So this is really, I think, refreshing. And possibly something that you might find useful. I like actually the light version of this one a little bit better. I think it looks nicer than the dark version, but you could definitely customize this one. If there's anything that I don't like about this is the lack of documentation. So there is like the quick start template somewhere. This quick start template just essentially gives you everything in a page that you can just inspect elements, like not just like the home page, but it just adds every sort of basic HTML tag in here and shows you how you would code it in this framework. So, but it really doesn't explain anything. It doesn't have like any sort of great documentation for you to look at. It's all just, it is what it is, and you can view source or inspect element and take a look at how they did stuff. So not my favorite in terms of documentation, and that's why I like some of these other ones. So as I mentioned, the one that I've really enjoyed using, and I think it's the one that sort of caused me to start looking for, for additional ones to see if there's anything as good as this one. It's called Pico.css. So I landed on this one, and I feel it's by far the best one with a ton of customization options, a lot of great looking defaults, fantastic documentation, and a lot of different features. So I recorded like a little screencast for you on why this is so cool. So let me go ahead and play that. Pico.css is a framework that gives you a great looking site with minimal or no classes. It's only 10K and shockingly easy to use. It feels like what writing HTML should be. To show you how cool it is, let's take a look at the difference between Pico and another popular framework, Bootstrap. Let's compare how you'd build some navigation with these two frameworks. In Bootstrap, you create a nav with a class of navbar. Now in there you add a number of other classes to control the colors. You can also add a container, and then if you want a brand, you add it to an anchor tag with a class of navbar brand. Then you can create a button for the toggler that collapses the navigation and makes it into a hamburger menu. Finally, the content that goes in the navigation goes in another div with a class of collapse and navbar collapse. And then you start creating a list of navigation items. Each navigation item has to have a nav item as well as a nav link. Now that seems pretty complicated for just a navigation. Let's take a look at how Pico handles navigation. Create a navigation, use the nav tag, and then you create two lists of items. The first list is the brand. It simply gets a list item, and if you want to, you can make it bold by using the strong tag. And then the other list is just a list of anchor tags with links to the different pages. You can see what the navigation looks like right here. If you want something with a logo in it, you would just create an additional list item with an SVG in it. You can see that by inspecting the navigation for the website. Another notoriously difficult component is the accordion. With Pico, all we have to do is create a details tag with some content in it. In Bootstrap, accordions are one of the toughest things to do properly because you have to include all types of classes, IDs, and even data attributes. Elements like buttons are just as simple. The basic button looks great without any classes, and if you need a button to be an inline element, you just add a row of button. There's also a couple of classes that you can use to create a secondary and a contrast style. And then you can create an outline by using the outline variant. Contrast that with how you do buttons in something like Tailwind CSS, which makes you add an insane amount of classes for even something as simple as a basic button. In terms of layout, you have two different classes. A container class, which gives you a center viewport, and then a container fluid class, which gives you a 100% layout. It also uses the same breakpoints and viewports as Bootstrap. In addition to that, there is a grid class, and that allows you to have a series of items next to each other by just using a div with a class of grid and then putting a series of items in there. If you add a figure as a wrapper container, you can make any content scroll horizontally. There is also a classless version of the framework, and in that case, you use the header, main, and footer tags, and they'll act as a container to define a centered viewport. For that, you're going to need to load a slightly different version of the framework. You can redefine some of the CSS variables, and that way you can customize any of the variables that come with the framework. There's also a Sass version of the library where you can customize the variables and create a customized version of Pico. All right, so let's see what it's like to put together a project with this framework. I've got a basic page over here on the right-hand side, and you can see that I have regular navigation tags with a list, and then I have couple of different sections here. A section for some information about myself, then some courses, and then at the bottom I have this social media type section. You can see that it's put together pretty plainly. So the first thing I need to do is install the framework. To do that, I'll go to Docs and I'll copy the code for this CDN right here. And I'm using a code swing, which means that I can just install the library by going to my command palette and adding the library. This is going to go in a style sheet, and here's the CSS that I need to put in. And you can see that immediately it's going to look a lot better. Let's go ahead and close this other side so that we have a little bit more room to work with. And you can see that in CodeSwing, I can use my CSS along with my HTML on this side. I'll be working just with the HTML for the most part, so I'll make that a lot smaller on this side. Now notice a little bit of a problem with the background color that it's picking. And I think this has to do with the way that CodeSwing is normalizing my HTML. I saw the same thing when I tried this on CodePen. And so if you are normalizing, you have to get rid of any normalized base styles that you're using. So I'm going to start off by defining in my HTML that I want to do, for the most part, the data theme that is light for this page. So most of the background will go to this light background. I can do that on a piece by piece basis. So for example, if I wanted to do that differently on a header section, I could just go ahead and add this data theme for a specific section. So I'm going to do that for my navigation, and then I'll make my CSS bring in an image. My little navigation could use a little bit higher contrast. So the way that you do that in this framework is by adding a contrast class. We can do that right here in each of these different anchor tags. I can put this in a container if I want them to have a little bit more room. And that follows the containers that you would see like in a Bootstrap grid. There's also a container fluid. And in the case of the navigation, I want the navigation to go almost all the way to the edge with a little bit of room here. All right, let's work on our main section. And right now, my main section has just a div right here. I'm going to actually switch it to a main class. That's going to give me a little bit of a different spacing. And I'm also going to want this in a container class. And I need to come all the way down here and make that a main tag as well. I'm also going to put each of the things that are an ID right now and put them into sections instead of divs. And what that's doing is adding a lot more room in between the items that have a different ID. All right, if we scroll up into this section right here, you see that I have a div here with a couple of headlines. The way that Pico works, if you put these inside an age group, they are spaced a little bit differently. So you can see that the main headline is still big, and the second one gets to be like a sub headline. The spacing is a lot better, and you can see this already done in some of these other places. And it's a good way to make that look pretty good. One of the things that I love about this framework is how the grid class works. So we have this courses section, and we want to put these items in a grid. So all I need to do is add a container with a class of grid. And you can see that it'll fit all those items in that space with a little bit of room in between. Let's work on making some cards for this section right here. To do that, I'll go ahead and add the class of grid to this container. So now these are side by side. And if you take these containers that right now are divs and you switch them to be articles, it's going to create a card layout for you. If I want to convert the links down here to buttons, all I have to do is change the role of the links to buttons. The goal here is not to avoid using any CSS, but to use only the CSS that we need. Let's go ahead and improve on this by adding styles that will help us center our content. So I'm going to center the about, courses, and follow IDs, and I'll just do a text align center here. So that's going to make all of these different layouts center, which I think looks a little bit better. So there's a lot more that you can do with that framework that I'm not showing you. And I really liked that. I feel like it's a great place to start. Not everything you're going to need, definitely not as good as Bootstrap, but if you need to put something together really quick, I think that's a great way to go. I mean, the navigation is almost like just like what I would normally do. You know, the fact that it has cards, I mean, I feel like some of the cards aren't spaced how I would like them spaced, but it's like a fantastic way to start. And I think if I were to get a little bit better with things, I would probably appreciate it a little bit more. So the things that I didn't show you, let's see, elements, there's the way that you do forms is pretty cool. So that same grid class that you use to separate cards, you can use when you're doing a form, and you can even do a side-by-side element. Something that's pretty complex to do with something like Bootstrap, and all the default elements look pretty good. Validation states are there, and just really this form section, it's something that's notoriously complicated to do. If you just want to go do a quick website with a quick form, this is fantastic because you don't have to write any styles almost. I think there are a few styles for forms. So there's a total of about, it says 10, but it's actually 11 styles in the framework. So we saw the containers. There's 2 containers. There's a grid class. There are some other styles scattered throughout. And everything else is done with like properties. And the tables look pretty good. So you can do roll grid for striped rows. So I mean, it's like almost like 80% of what I would normally need to build a website is right there. There's accordion components. This is ridiculously difficult in Bootstrap. It's so complicated to do one of these. And the cards we already saw, the modals, it does have like a way of doing these kind of modals. And I don't think it has any JavaScript, so you do have to write that. They have some code where you can take a look at a sample of what you would need for JavaScript. And you can click here and see what a modal would look like. And again, they give you the code for that. So think about the things that you need on a normal website. Most of the time, they're going to be these things. You saw the navigation, and there's different ways. So there is, a way to going to a hamburger if you want that. And also a way to just create links that are stacked vertically. There's a progress bar, which I don't really use that much, so I don't know. And then also there's a way of creating tooltips, which is another thing that I use sort of often. So I feel like it's 80% of the way of something that I would need. And if it's not if it's not the end point of my website, I think it's a great start. And that this is the kind of thing that I feel like I did this show for, to kind of showcase something like this, that is something that you keep in your toolbox, and it's going to help you when you need something quick that works pretty well with a minimal amount of effort. So I'm pretty curious as to what people think about this sort of framework, and the rest of the time I'll just spend answering any questions that anybody has. So I'd love to find out. Let's see, I'm looking at both the LinkedIn website as well as the sort of my interface for Ecamm Live, which is what I use. I don't see anything in the scroll. So next up, I think I'm trying to do something. I've noticed a lot of things going on with like backend frameworks. Those are a little bit harder to put together. So there's a lot of backend frameworks that are changing things. So you saw like a remix.run is a website that will show you essentially something that used to be a React router, but they converted it into their own framework. So I think I would love to get into that. Those things get a little bit more difficult to work with. I've been dreaming of sort of messing around with Next.js. I'm decent in React, but I haven't had a lot of experience with it. I know a lot of people use it. And perhaps Hydrogen from Shopify is something else. So I had an idea of maybe doing something like the Revenge of the Backend or something, because what you're seeing now is that for the longest time we have this concept of just doing like static websites or pre-rendered websites, which really helps the backend because it doesn't have to dynamically generate a lot of things. And there's a lot of crazy action happening on the backend to allow you to do things that you can't really do with a pre-rendered website. So I think that's where I'm thinking of going maybe next week. I think I have one more week of where I can have some fun, and then after that I'm going to go back into production. So you'll probably not see me. So let's see. Is it possible? So thanks, Jose. Is it possible to use both Pico and regular CSS? Yeah, I used a little bit of CSS there. You can add anything else that you don't have. So you could use CSS Grid if you wanted a more complicated layout. And one of the things on the website is a place where you can, it shows you how to, in the grid, let's see if I can show you this. So side by side, like if you go to the grid section, they say, here's how you can, if you need something more complicated for layout, you can merge Pico with the Bootstrap grid system. So you could just maybe borrow the grid system from Bootstrap and use that, and then use Pico for the rest. And of course, you could just use CSS Grid if you're familiar with that as well. So yeah, I think it's like a great start. I also like that it had Sass, like a version of this that was in Sass, so that you could make your own thing from it. I think that with these frameworks, just overwriting the default variables is probably most of what I would do. I don't know where that is, maybe in getting started, customizations. There's also a classless version, which is kind of interesting. So it's even like I mentioned, there's like 11 classes. This would be 0 classes, and then you would add your own thing. So this is actually, I think, a fantastic sort of start for a project, but maybe not the end. Yeah, it definitely looks easy. Yeah, and of course, yeah, I just already answered that. Yeah, you actually asked it twice, so part of my silence. Yeah, flaky internet. Yeah, it happens. Revenge. I was like thinking of something Star Wars-y, like the backend strikes back, but you could probably get into dangerous sayings if you start saying like the word backend with a lot of other things. So, and just exploring that aspect of, hey, what is going on with the backend? And if you think about it, like I never really bought into the pre-rendered sort of revolution as much, because there's just things that you need the backend for. And pre-rendered, it means that you're just rendering on your local server. You're pre-rendering it on a local server. Why not just send that to a backend server that's going to be much more efficient? It's going to be cached. It's going to use a CDN and give you something that is much more efficient. One of the things that happens when I write my blog is it feels like every time I write an article, I have to like update some sort of module, something on the server. So I think one of the reasons you're seeing places like Vercel and places like Netlify acquire properties, or it's not really acquiring properties. Technically, they're still open source, but they have, Rich Harris, the developer for Svelte, was hired by Vercel. Part of that, I think, is going to be how can we integrate some of these things to make really compelling end products for people that don't want to worry about updating a module like every time they're trying to just do something. So I think that that's going to be really compelling for people who just want to get stuff done. If they can have not just a framework, but an infrastructure that allows people to do things, then I think that's much more compelling. And I feel like that's where the industry is going. There's still going to be a fight between the industry and what people want to do, because the industry wants to do what's the cheapest, the fastest, the most time saving for them. And people have different needs. Like something like this, I think, is very, very basic and simple. but you definitely need something for the enterprise and that next level type of user. So super cool. So I think Peter's doing another Next.js course focused exclusively. Yeah, I think it's probably a safe bet. Again, though, at some point I will be doing more stuff on Svelte just because of that move by Vercel. I feel like they're going to maybe create some sort of compelling platform that's going to integrate all those things. So you never know. I mean, things are changing. I saw some of those people that are, I think it was the Hydrogen or the Remix Front, I think the Remix Front people saying that maybe we're entering the post-React era. I don't buy it yet, but it's a nice thought. At some point, though, React will probably go away. There will just be something so much more compelling. Astro came out of nowhere this year to really take over like all the oxygen in the room. If you look at Vite, for example, everybody was using all kinds of different build tools when Vite came out. And it's such a compelling product that it's causing people to take a look at it. And us developers always like and enjoy using the shiny new things. So yeah, this is really good, Rachel. I when I saw what it did, I was like, my mouth was open, because I'm like, when I was doing the course on Bootstrap and I had to do the accordion chapter, that accordion chapter took me there's times where I can record, like 10 videos in one day. There's times where I'm just recording one. And I believe that was one of those times, because there are so many classes that you have to add to get the accordion going. And this is like just a couple of tags and you're done. And it handles everything. And that just gives you a lot more time. And also, I believe a lot more flexibility. I feel like it's more like what HTML should be or should have been, and maybe if we can sort of convince the browser manufacturers to improve the defaults, why not have something that looks this good? The defaults for multiple browsers or all the browsers have a decent set of defaults that people can just write HTML and not have to go through hoops, through different types of normalization. Installing frameworks. Like if you developed a more consistent sort of language, I think it would be really beneficial to everyone. So yeah, thanks for that question, Rachel. Cool. And Peter says, I forgot about the Svelte. Yeah. Yeah, there's not a lot of the demand for Svelte. Maybe where you're at. I think that when I looked at, and I think last time I looked at the rankings for the different frameworks. So Svelte is clearly past Angular in terms of, I think, GitHub stars, in terms of popularity. So it has picked up some acceleration. I think it is, I did do a course on Svelte if you want to take a look at it. That's actually another one that I might add like a quick demo of just showing you. My goals with the demos are just to go, here's what it is. This is why you might want to check it out. And then I'll build something with it. That's been my approach with these little sort of pre-recorded demos. Just what is it? Why should I care? And then the features that I think are relevant. And then let's build, even if it's something super simple. Let's build something, because I think when you see me using it, it gives you a different perspective. And then you can go jump in the code and try it out yourself if you want to. I give you like a little starter GitHub repo that you can just go play with it if you want. So that's the approach. So I'm thinking, even with it's going to be difficult with frameworks like Next or something like Svelte, but I could build something that is not like a 1 hour course, but like a 10-minute, here's the basics, here's a demo. And then I think when you use it, you find out that it's a really compelling sort of project. It does have some excellent features, and I can't wait to see what Rich Harris does now that is doing this full time. So maybe we'll see what happens, and who knows? Like maybe some of these other frameworks that are just coming out. I know Astro is going to be really big, but Astro is something that you can use on top of React or any of the other frameworks as well. And I think that Astro is not really anything different. It's just a bunch of good ideas those ideas will all get absorbed by even something like Next.js and other projects as well. So I think you're making a good move, Peter. That's smart. That's a smart move. So cool. Thanks for the interaction today, and everybody, thanks for coming. That's all I had for you. I'm going to do one more, hopefully, one more show next week, maybe about the back end. It depends on how much time I have before I have to go away for a couple of weeks and focus on, I'll be doing like a new version of Tailwind CSS 3 for LinkedIn Learning. So good talking to you all. Been a pleasure. Yes, yeah. So yeah, definitely the videos that I'm doing, they're not meant to be a in-depth look. The videos that I'm doing is what is it? What does it do? Should I sort of check it out? And then a 10 to 15 minute demo of let's build something with it and see what are the pain points. It's not meant to be like a comprehensive, like if I was doing something for LinkedIn Learning, I would either do like a, depending on what it was, like a first look course, let's build an app with this, or something that was like an essential training. Let's go into like most of the features that you're going to need. But this toolbox is just all about, let's discover some new things that maybe you weren't thinking about and see if it's something that I'm trying to give you stuff to put on your toolbox and go, hey, I remember there's this like really easy way of creating these sites. Or when I tried Astro, here's the relevant features that I liked. I like the partial hydration feature is pretty cool. And the way that you use YAML to pre-render fetch some data and then do some JavaScript in the YAML. That's pretty awesome. And those are the things that I'm trying to do with these. So anyways, cool. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, Tailwind. So I have covered Tailwind, and did I cover Windy? I think I covered Windy. I don't know if I'm ready to do. I think there's another one called Uno CSS that I'm looking at, but it's in like alpha right now, so I'll wait a little bit before I go attack that one. I covered Open Props last week, which is amazing. I was really, really happy with that experience. So that's definitely something you should look at if you haven't seen the previous episodes. You can find them all on rabo.org. So yeah, I am looking for it. I'm doing them a little bit. The one thing that changed about Tailwind was the approach. So before, the way that I approached the Tailwind Essential Training course was I'm just going to cover every feature in Tailwind. And that was a bear because there's a lot of classes in Tailwind. But with the just-in-time compiler, every feature isn't necessarily, like every option of every feature. And if you look at that course, it has like for every class in Tailwind CSS, I have a page with all of the options displayed so you could see all of them. But with this new version, since everything is JIT, it uses the just-in-time compiler, showing you every option isn't necessarily relevant because even though you have like 40 different, say, font sizes, you could actually just type in whatever font size you want now. So that's which font sizes it has. It's almost irrelevant because it generates a custom version of the font sizes you're using. So you don't even need all those classes anymore. So I'm taking a slightly different approach with the new version. I'm pretty excited about it. You guys will let me know if you like it. So good seeing everyone. Thank you for all the questions. I really appreciate that. I enjoy this time with y'all, and I will see you again hopefully next week.